Hi everyone and welcome back to Watch Mentor Nick here with another episode, and today we're diving into a topic that's really close to my heart as a watchmaker because I have seen watch buyers enjoy the thrill of a new piece but rarely think about what comes next, which is the service, and is just as important as the purchase itself. So let's maybe start with why do we even need to service a watch in the first place? Now, since you own a mechanical watch, it's important to remember that it's made up of many tiny moving parts, and wherever parts move, there is, of course, friction. So, in order to minimize this friction, we apply special lubricating oils to components. But over time, however, these oils naturally wear down or dry out, and when that happens, friction starts to increase, which can cause the part to wear faster and affect the watch's accuracy or leading to problems of certain complications, a shorter power reserve, and maybe even to the watch not functioning at all. So that's why a watch should be serviced, because a regular service ensures that all the moving parts are properly cleaned, lubricated, and if necessary replaced and adjusted, which keeps your watch running smoothly, protects the movement from unnecessary wear, and most importantly extends the life of your timepiece by decades. And I know for people who are new to watches, this might sound surprising that the watch needs that much attention, and is a reaction I have experienced many times with clients before, because often as a buyer, it's sometimes really difficult to see what the watch has to endure. That's why I recently asked ChatGPT to calculate how many kilometers the second wheel of a watch travels in a year. And believe it or not, it is around 16 kilometers, which is beyond remarkable for such a tiny piece. So now just imagine what it has to endure and why a watch needs servicing. And if you think about it, yes, it makes sense since the balance wheel and every other component move non-stop, day and night. So it only makes sense that this impressive piece of engineering requires maintenance. Okay, so far everything is clear, but the next question is, how do you actually know when it is the right moment to service your watch? And here's what I suggest based on what I have experienced. You have probably heard that the watch should be serviced every few years, usually around 3 to 5, which is the most common recommendation you will hear from the majority of watch brands. And I know many clients have told me they believe this is just a way for brands to make money, which is a myth and really not true, because believe it or not, some service centers do not actually profit from servicing. Now, why exactly after a certain number of years? Well, these recommendations are based on tests showing that after a certain period, the lubricating oils inside the watch begin to dry out and lose their efficiency. And please note, they dry out regardless of whether you wear your watch or not, which is another common misconception and a myth that not wearing a watch somehow extends the service period. On the other hand, some even say, but my watch is still running, so there is no need for a service, which is again another myth and a bad assumption, because the watch might still be running, but it's running without proper lubrication. And ignoring that can lead to much more serious damage over time, which usually ends up costing far more than a timely service. So in short, based on what I have experienced, I really do recommend sticking to around 5 years, unless a brand says our watches can go up to more than that. But if you notice your watch is not working properly before the recommended service period, and you suddenly see a major drop in power reserve, significant changes in accuracy, you hear unusual noises, or a winding that feels harder than usual, have it checked. Now that we know why and when to service a watch, let's move to the really interesting part. Where should you get it done? And this is often debated whether to go to an official service center, a certified brand retailer, or an independent watchmaker. Now, having been on all sides, let me show you all your options and what you need to know before making the decision. So one reason there is much debate about whether to go to an official brand service center, a certified retailer, or an independent watchmaker is that some people assume brand centers are simply more expensive because they perform unnecessary work, which is, to be honest, far from the truth and often not more than a myth. Because the truth is, if an official service center costs more, it's mainly because you're paying for brand certified parts, specialized training, extended testing, and warranty protection, all designed to maintain your watch's long-term performance and value, which of course takes time and resources. On the other hand, independents involve far fewer people in the process, which of course naturally lowers the cost, while brands and official retailers have additional overhead for logistics, administration, and service management. Besides that, what many do not realize is that if a retailer wants to service watches in-house, they have to meet, really strict brand standards. This includes sending their watchmakers for specialized trainings, purchasing dedicated tools, and following strict guidelines. All of this, of course, requires some investment. And while I was on both sides, I experienced that the extra cost you pay at an official service center is often worth it. It is what it is because watchmakers at official centers are trained specifically for your movement. So, since they work on it on a regular basis, they can deal with potential issues much better. But in this regard, it's really important for me to point out that this is not about that independent watchmakers lack skills. Not at all. But they might not have the same routine experience with specific movements, especially when it comes to complex or in-house movements that require brand-specific know-how. In fact, even as a certified retailer, there were times we had to send watches directly to the brand, as we did not get the spare parts and were not even allowed to service them because some of these movements contained complications which required some extra training. So, in my opinion, if you are considering an independent watchmaker, it usually makes sense only for watches with ETA, Selita, or other third-party movements, since spare parts for those are more accessible, and servicing does not really require specialized tools or training. Otherwise, I really do recommend going directly to a brand boutique, or at least to an official retailer. Because look, I remember when I had to service a watch and did not have access to proper spare parts, my only option was to somehow patch things together, and that always made me feel really uncomfortable because I knew this was not how things should be done. Now let's move fast forward. You have dropped off your watch at the service center, and the next question is, how does the cost estimate actually work? What does it include, and how long will the repair take? When you drop your watch at the service center, you usually have two options. You can request a cost estimate, which often comes with a small fee if you later decide to reject the service, which costs typically around $60 to $80 depending on the brand. Besides that, at some places you can sometimes also set the cost limit. For example, you might say, I don't know, go ahead with the service as long as it does not exceed $1,000. And in case the repair would cost more, you will eventually get the cost estimate anyway. Furthermore, some service centers even have price lists, so based on your model or movement, they can give you a fairly accurate idea of the cost, assuming nothing unexpected is found under the dial, which is really important to mention here. But please note, this process mainly applies to current models because, as I mentioned in one of my videos recently, vintage watches are treated differently, and in some cases, the cost estimate alone can run into a few $100s easily. Another reason prices can differ is that the watch may be in a more severe condition and requires extra attention or spare parts, which can make the majority of tasks suddenly mandatory instead of optional. But what does this really mean? Well, understanding the difference between these two types of tasks is the next important thing you should know, and it's the last part in today's episode I want to discuss. Now, mandatory tasks are technically essential to ensure proper functioning of the watch and to validate the service warranty, and on the other hand, optional tasks are mostly for aesthetic reasons recommended, things that don't affect performance, so at the end it's up to you whether to proceed with them or not. But things get really interesting when a task that seems optional actually becomes mandatory. And this is where many people struggle to understand why they suddenly are mandatory. Let me give you an example. Let's say you break the glass of an only 3-year-old watch. Normally, the movement wouldn't need an overhaul in this case, so you might think you only need a new glass. But in this case, servicing the movement suddenly becomes mandatory because the glass splinters could have entered the movement and possibly damage it. Look, I get it, and I have to admit that sometimes these cost estimates seem to be ridiculous, and I also understand This is where some clients turn to an independent watchmaker just to make the watch somehow work and eventually just patch it together. Speaking of independence, there is one last important thing to keep in mind. If you bring a modified or patched together watch to an official service center, say one that has been customized outside the brand's guidelines, like, I don't know, adding diamonds to a bezel, for example, in some cases, some manufacturers will refuse to service it unless it is first brought back to factory condition. Now, having said that, what is the takeaway here? Summarized, what do I recommend based on first-hand experiences? So here is my conclusion. So my honest advice is this: owning a mechanical watch is a privilege in my opinion. It is a beautiful experience that not everyone gets to enjoy, so what may feel normal to you might be something many people will never be able to experience. That's why I believe this privilege should be appreciated, and one of the best ways to show some appreciation is through proper maintenance, cheesy as it may sound. And what I mean by that is no shortcuts, no cheap fixes, take care of it properly and give it to the right people to service. And before we wrap up this episode, let me leave you with one last thought. If maintaining your watch feels like a burden, remember why you bought it in the first place. You bought it for the experience, for the emotion of wearing it. So think of servicing it as the tool that keeps the experience alive, allowing you to enjoy this for decades to come. Having said that, it's time to wrap up today's episode, which I hope has shed some light on servicing your watch. If I missed anything or if you have any questions in this regard, feel free to drop them in the comment section down below. But I especially encourage you to share your experiences because they matter a lot and I'm sure they will help others as well. And to be honest, this is actually what this channel is all about. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe for more watchmaking related content, as there are plenty of exciting topics coming up. But for now, thank you for tuning in today, and as always, stay blessed and see you next time.